Philadelphia Eagles are now deeply entrenched in their search for a new head coach, but I can't help feeling like we've been here before, like this is familiar, and it's only a few years ago that this exact same pattern took place. And I want to take a minute just to go over that and see where the Eagles are at, because I really feel like whoever they hire right now isn't gonna matter in the long run, because this cycle could keep repeating unless something changes. If you're new around here, guys, make sure you leave a like and hit that subscribe button. I can't wait to hear what you guys think of this in the comments. Again, a quick apology. I'm sorry there hasn't been a lot of in-depth content recently with regards to the fancy editing and the free agency stuff. There's been so much content on phillysportsnetwork.com. I just haven't had the time to kind of dedicate like 4 or 5 hours to. So these videos are a nice way for me to just get what's on my chest out, have a discussion with you guys, and hopefully create some fun content as well. So for us to understand what I'm talking about here, let's turn back the clocks, okay? 2016 off-season. The Eagles are coming off a torrid 2015 campaign where Chip Kelly gets the can and the Eagles need a new head coach. Jeffrey Lurie has the press conference where he says, I want to roll back the days. I want to roll it back to the Andy Reid glory years to find the type of coach that can restore the Eagles to what they were, to competing in championship games and needing that emotional intelligence after Chip Kelly became a human cyborg and broke the team. Their initial target was Adam Gase. Now, luckily, that didn't happen and Adam Gase went to Miami, but that was their guy. That was the one they were most heavily linked to, and then they interviewed Doug Peterson, and the connection was kind of clear, right? Former quarterback for the Eagles, then was a quarterback coach under the Eagles, who of course worked with Nick Foles and Andy Reid, then followed Big Red to Kansas City, grew into the offensive coordinator role, and earned a nice reputation. There were concerns that he didn't have play calling experience, and Andy Reid literally came out and said, hey, he's been calling the second halves of my games for about half a season now. And then when Gase went off the market, the Eagles fell back, took Doug Peterson, and thankfully the rest was history. Peterson turned out to be a fantastic hire. And now we fast forward a bit, where Doug Peterson has been fired for a multitude of reasons, and more reports are coming out, and there was one that came out today on WIP that, I don't want to be that guy, Philly Sports Network had it months ago, okay, saying that Doug Peterson was almost being pressured into certain game day decisions by the top brass, by Howie, by Jeffrey Lurie. How much of that is genuine and not inflated, I don't know. All I can say is that Chris Infante, our writer, had this about 4 months ago, and everyone shoved it into the ground. So PSN 1, rest of the world nil. We're coming. But now, after parting ways with Doug Peterson, Jeffrey Lurie goes up to the podium and again references the early years. You know, he's like in the first 15 years he went to multiple championship games and they went to a Super Bowl. And it's like, Jeffrey Lurie, that was 16, 17 years ago now. Like, we're not even talking about restoring the glory of 2017, 18, and 19, where you had a Super Bowl and 3 consecutive playoff runs despite having an injury-plagued roster and a ton of off-the-field issues. We're talking glory years from 20 years ago. So to get back to that, in Jeffrey Lurie's mind, of, well, if I can't have Andy Reid, I want to get the next best thing. And the Eagles were obviously then linked with Eric Bieniemy and, of course, Mike Kafka. Now, it's interesting that Mike Kafka, drafted by the Eagles, former quarterback, goes to Kansas City, works under Andy Reid, becomes a QB coach, that's where the similarities end, doesn't have play calling experience, but because he's coached up Patrick Mahomes, who is a generational talent and was a league MVP and an absolute stud, he is clearly, in my opinion, the best quarterback in the league right now, you're like, alright, head coach material. And if it's not, and you go with Eric Bieniemy, your ties to the Eagles are kind of a lot more subtle, and you have just got the link to Big Red, and you see the offense that Kansas City's put out. But if the Eagles want any kind of change, they can't just fire a coach and go back to where they found it. And everyone will go, yeah, well, they can't talk to Kafka because he's in the playoffs, and they can't talk to Bieniemy because, they might run to the Super Bowl. That's fine. The Eagles were there before, though. The exact same thing happened, and they interviewed their guy, they let him go. The fallback plan, by the time that fell through, by the time the decision was made, was Doug Peterson. And again, luckily it turned out for the best. But right now, they've interviewed Robert Saleh. They've been looking at other potential candidates, a lot of them on the defensive side of the ball. And if they don't get someone like Salah, who in my opinion would be the dream hire, like if we're talking defensive candidate, I would much rather get an offensive coach knowing you've got $127 million tied up in a quarterback who fell apart last year. But if you want the best overall candidate, it is Salah. And he's had 2 interviews with the Jets, he's had 1 with the Eagles. If they let him go and they fall back and the new head coach is Kafka or Bieniemy, I think we're doomed to repeat history. I really do. It is the same pattern again. The Eagles said they wanted a leader of coaches. They were the words from Jeffrey Lurie. I think Robert Saleh is that. That's the guy they want. That's the guy they should want. And I did hear through the grapevine some very positive things about the interview. But there is that overwhelming sense of, we've seen this. This same thing's happened. He didn't leave with a contract. And if the job was on the table and an offer was made, and then they go and talk to Kellen Moore, or then they go and talk to Lincoln Riley, or then they go and request interviews with Brian DeBoer or Arthur Smith or whoever, then are they not just doing the same thing again? And it goes beyond that. It doesn't stop there. Like, I'm not just talking about head coaches. I think this Eagles team has a fundamental problem with micromanaging. And we're seeing that. Again, the report came out from Chris a few months ago about those game day decisions, and there were a lot more. There was a lot more within that we weren't able to put out, or we kind of held back on just because it sounded in context just so ridiculous. And now with everything that's coming out, now more people are obviously coming forward, you're contextualizing it a bit more. And you go back, and I think that the Eagles were almost so scared of a Chip Kelly era happening again that they are micromanaging, and they have taken a much more attentive care to detail, and they're looking to make sure everything's perfect. Like, there's no greater example than Mike Groh having his job security hammered down by Doug Peterson, all the chips on the table, and then a day later the guy's canned. Jeffrey Lurie overrides the head coach, fires his coordinator, and brings in a team of, Walmart Power Rangers who completely break the offense. I mean, looking back, I spent months trying to work out why Scangarello and company were brought in. I made the ties to Jalen Hurts and the play-action game. But in reality, Moninre went from Baltimore, and Scangarello was shouted at by Joe Flacco, was shouted at by Philip Lindsay to the media about his abilities. There was so much of it that just didn't make sense. And regardless of who the Eagles hire, whether it's Robert Saleh, whether it's Arthur Smith, whether it's Riley, whether it is Mike Kafka or someone like that, it doesn't matter, because eventually that same pattern's going to repeat, and the Eagles are going to draft square pegs for circle holes. They're going to expect the coach to bend everything around them, and if he doesn't, that's when the problems will occur. What Jeffrey Lurie has done is look at that one incredible 2017 offseason where Howie Roseman was the king of the castle, won GM of the year, made it no move was anything less than brilliant. And deciphered that as, well, that's the basis, that's why they won, that's why we were so good, because Howie did this. And then he doubled down on Howie. And then in 2018, not quite good enough. 2019, that's a worry. 2020, okay, 3rd year in a row, this is getting worrying, what's going to happen? I'll fire the head coach. The signs are there. Howie's amazing at contracts, but finding the talent and the talent evaluation isn't being discussed by Jeffrey Lurie right now. Which tells me there is almost an overwhelming sense of faith that the talent evaluation will get it right, and it's the coaching staff that let it down. I think it's a bit of column A and a bit of column B. You cannot revamp one without the other. And if Howie Roseman needs someone to constantly hold his hand, I don't know. I just think that the Eagles could be doomed to repeat history unless something drastic changes. And I want to get your thoughts on that, guys. Let me know in the comment section down below. From myself, Liam Jenkins. My Twitter is @LiamJenkinsPSN. If you want to follow it, I'll see you soon.